All right, hi everybody. Let me first, before talking about the topic, I just want to say thank you so much to Rabbi Katzin for inviting me to be here. It's an honor for me to be here. It's an honor for me to be here with Rabbi Rand, who actually lives in Eretz Israel, and he will talk about this. And I want to say thank you to Sophia. Thank you so much, Sophia, for inviting both of us. And yeah, I feel very up to the task at hand, being that my area of expertise is really relating to Shalom Bayis and how couples navigate the road when the road that is standing in front of them is not the same road that they started out with. Right? They started out their marriage on one road and now they're ready to move to another road. Now, what happens when, I'm going to hop right in there. What happens when you're on that road and you've been traveling together and one person comes up with this brand new idea that wasn't there to begin with? One person says, hey, I have a great idea. You know, things here in America, they're a little bit difficult and we're having a lot of challenges here. I hear from my friends in Israel that they are living the high life. They are happy. They have community. They have each other. They don't feel isolated. They don't feel like foreigners in a strange land like we do over here, my dear darling, like we are here in America. We're strangers in a strange land. My friends in Russia that are living in Israel now, my Russian friends, are telling me we're not strangers in a strange land. We're Jews in a Jewish country and we feel so comfortable. Now, what happens if one of the couple thinks this is a great idea? Yes, let's do this. Now, the other part of the couple, they never heard
One
about
second, hold on, Dr. Zakheim, hold on 1 second. I'll be the other part of the couple, okay? And I'll say, well, my friends have been telling me, because they're already in Israel, and I'm in touch with them regularly. And they've been telling me about all the hardships that they're going through. And they're telling me about all the bureaucracy that they're putting up with. And they're telling me about how they're feeling isolated. And they're telling me about how these financial struggles, it wasn't that dream that they envisioned. And they're sort of warning me in a nice way, think twice before you come. So that's the other partner. Now, what do you have to say about that, Dr. Zakheim?
Now, that is a perfect example. And I think we're right on board, on point, as they say, about what this topic is about. What happens when you start a relationship together with the common vision in mind, with that common vision, but then 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, maybe even 10 years down the line after you have children, one of you pops up and says, great idea. I have a great idea, darling. We're leaving. And then the other one responds with the response that Rabbi Rand just gave. Oh, yeah, you think that's a great idea? I love you very much, but this is not happening. I'm very happy over here. I'm not hearing good things over there. So what is our topic about today? Our topic today is about how do you reconcile this controversy? How it's controversy. It's a difference of opinion. And we're not talking about a difference of opinion about whether the air conditioning should be on or whether the air conditioning should be off. We're not talking about a difference of opinion about whether it's too hot in the car or too cold in the car. That one we can deal with. We're talking about a difference of opinion that is a change of life. This is a major game changer. How does one person who suddenly wakes up in the morning and says, I've got the answer, let's leave? How does this partner say, what do you mean? I'm just getting used to living over here. How do we work with that? What do we do? So I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page, that this is the topic that we all want to be talking about. Yes, so we're all there? Okay, so let me begin with what I'm going to suggest, and then Rabbi Rand was going to take over and talk about what he suggests. I think it's very important to talk about what have you experienced in your past when it came to change? What have you experienced in your past when it came to a difference of opinion? Are you a person who likes change? Are you a person who's very instinctual and when something doesn't go right, I'm ready for a change? Are you a person who likes change? Does it work for you? Now, it's very possible that one person they're very spontaneous. They're good with change. Let's go to Israel. What's the big deal? If we don't like it, honey, we could always come back. So You have to look at who is this person that you are. You have to recognize the person that you are. Who are you? Are you a person that needs things to stay the way that they are? Are you a person that does not like change? Leave me where I am. I will manage where I am. I will make the best of where I am, and life will be good over here. Are you that person? Or are you the person that this is really tough? As soon as things get tough, I like to change my road and create a new road. Now, which person are you? Now, why is it so important to know which person you are? Because as soon as you can recognize the person that you are, the person that you've been conditioned to be, at least you know that you can have the conversation. At least you can say, I am a person who's very comfortable with no change. I'm a person who likes constancy in my life. And that's why I married you. You gave me a feeling of safety. You gave me that feeling that we left Russia to come to America, to start a new life here in America. And listen, that's what we decided to do. And let's just follow through on that route. Let's stay there. And it is so important to recognize who you are. Are you that person? Are you that person who says, I've left Russia, I'm here in America now, our children are in school, you have a job, I have a job. Okay, maybe you don't have a great job right now, but it'll get better. But we are here. We have our feet in the ground. We've already been here. What? Now we should change again and have to go through all of the turmoil of what it means to change our lifestyles? Do you really want to do that? That's person number one. That's person number one. Now, what's person number two? Rabbi Rand, what's person number two?
Well, person
I'm gonna
number
do
two.
some laundry and then I'll come join you, okay?
I'm understanding from you that person number one, person number two, those are the two possibilities, right? Is one more inclined to change, and one is more of a let's stay and let's get things to work out. So I would say, to compliment you, Dr. Zakheim, that the question now is, well, how have you been working together as a couple to begin with? If we're talking about Shalom Bayit, that means that we're talking about people that are already married and they've already had their, so to speak, differences of opinion. A very wise man says often, he says, two intelligent people can have two intelligent differing opinions. But what happens when we got to make that decision?
I love that. I love what you're saying. So what you're saying is, well, let's look back at the past. Let's go back again to our past. How do you deal with controversy? How do you deal with somebody differing in opinion from you? So for this topic that we're dealing with today, it's not so much about moving or not moving. We're not going to make a decision about that. What we're talking about today is the Shalom Bayis issue. How are you relating to each other on a subject that is a disagreement? And that would bring us back, Rabbi Rand, would you not agree? That brings us back to the topic of, what about other disagreements that have happened? How did you deal with those other disagreements? And that's a very important question. So what might those other disagreements have been? Another disagreement might have been, well, should we have a child? Are we ready for more children? Another disagreement may be about, where do we want to be living, even if we're living in New York City? Do you want to live in Brooklyn? Do you want to live in Brighton Beach? Do you want to live in Manhattan Beach? And then how did you deal with those kind of disagreements? Now, from my stand, and Rabbi Rand, I'm very curious to hear about it from your stand, from your vantage point. From my vantage point, step number one is identifying yourself as who you are, not accusing the other person and saying, oh, that's such a stupid idea. That's so dumb. I don't like what you're saying. That's not going to a good place, because that's attacking the other person. We don't want to attack the other person. What we want to do is we want to be grounded and feel strong in our opinion. So when we have a conversation like this, it's not about, well, you are saying things that I don't agree with. Well, you are wrong because I happen to know that in Israel, they're having a miserable time. Well, you're not reading enough of the news. I'm reading more news. Instead of that, identify yourself as a personality. I'm a person that what? I'm a person that doesn't like to change places that much. I'm a person, you know, honey, that when it comes to change, I'm just not so comfortable with change. So how do we manage this? How do we talk about this? How can we discuss this topic when it's a topic that makes me uncomfortable because it's pulling the rug out from underneath me. It's making me feel very shaky and I start worrying about everything. When I think about changes, I start worrying about everything. But the important thing, I think, Rabbi Rand, and all of us here, is about presenting ourselves of who I am instead of presenting myself as who you are not. I don't like you because you're what you're saying. It's not about you. It's about I. And not about I in an inflammatory, hurtful kind of way. Just about I have a weakness. It's I. This is difficult for me. And that I think is the key to shalom bayis. It's not about screaming at the other person. I just want to throw in over here. The most difficult part of this is what have you been growing up with? Did you grow up with parents that the way they communicated with each other was in a screaming pattern? And that is very, very crucial, because if you grew up with parents that communicated with each other in a screaming pattern, well, this is going to be very difficult for you to have a difference of opinion and not be screaming at each other. But shalom bayis, you want to have shalom bayis. And the key to shalom bayis is I am one kind of person, you are a different kind of person. I'm not better than you and you're not better than me, but we are different and we have differences of opinion. And how do we navigate this road of differences of opinion? Rabbi. Yeah.
Me? Okay. First of all, a great setup for a discussion, and really my heart goes to going straight into what we call conflict resolution, which we've spoken about in Prague, Rabbi Katzin, if you remember, in Prague and in Moscow, conflict resolution. But before we get into that, which is a little bit more technical, great, very important and fundamental on how to deal with it, I'm going to once again take Dr. Zakheim's thoughts and bring it into a perspective of shalom bayis, and that is two different people, possibly two different ideas, possibly, but what is the uniting factor between them? How can we get from who I am and who you are to what is best for us as a team and as a family? And that's that bridge that we really want to try to get to in any sort of building of shalom bayis. The key before we get to technical and nice tools of how to do it is the concept. And the concept is to slowly minimize the I and you and to maximize the we and together. And really, the topic of moving to Israel and the shalom bayis concept of the transition is, I think, very, very beautifully apropos to the Jewish people in general. The idea of moving is the idea of usually high goals. High goals. It's not just about making a move. It's about moving to Israel. It's about, as Sophia mentioned, people are how much, I think, a 300% explosion in people looking to move into a Koda Aliyah. Where's that coming from? That's not just coming from a better financial life or a better social life. That's coming from an identity. We are identifying as Jews, and we're thinking about safety and future and our homeland. So look what's going on already. We have a background of idealism going on. Are we in this together? Do we both see this together as a change? Because any change and any transition, as Dr. Zakheim will tell you, is automatically going to mean an imbalance in anything, in personal menuchat nefesh, in personal feeling good about ourselves, and for sure in familial. Children, I just want to point out, if we're talking about families that have children, I can say straight up, for sure, well known that moving to Israel, which again, I'm here, but moving to Israel is probably on children a greater challenge than on adults or on young children. You need a lot of good shalom bayit over there to be able to not only handle your own transitions together, but also to handle it as parents raising children, because they really will need you. Would you agree?
So I'm going to hop in over here for a moment, Rabbi Rand, because I love what you're bringing up. You're bringing up the topic of the we. It's not about I or about you. It's about we. And so let's talk about that. What does it mean to have true shalom bayis, right? Let's go back a couple of years before you got together with each other, right? You're traveling through life. Life is good, but you're feeling very lonely. You feel lonely. You're ready to find your partner in life. Do you remember those days? Like, do you remember those days of feeling lonely and saying, I want to have my zivug. I want to have my partner. It says in the Torah that God has a partner for every single person. Where is my partner? And we walk around for years, some of us for many, many years before we find our partner, right? And then we find our partner. And then after we find our partner, sometimes something bad happens. What happens? We forget what it felt like to be alone. Ein tov ha'adam lichyot levad, right? It's not good for a man to be alone. It's not good for a woman to be alone. It's better to be together. Now, in that togetherness, there is that we, which means that I can't have everything exactly the way that I want it, but I wanted to be married. I wanted to be with somebody. I wanted to have children together with somebody. Now, being alone, yeah, sure. My air conditioning can be exactly the way I want it when I'm driving in my car. I can drive as fast as I want to when I'm in my car. I can eat whatever I want to, and I don't care about what the other person wants to eat. But part of being married is reconciling and saying, I want to have what I want, but I love, let's not forget that word, that very important word. I love the person that I married. I love that person. I want to make them happy. So I think that when we have these conversations about shalom bayis and about moving to Israel, and whether the conversation is about what to eat or how to parent our children, we have to always try to remember, what does it mean to be in love? We get so caught up in life, especially these days. We get so caught up in COVID and illness and social distancing. And should I wear a mask? And shouldn't I wear a mask? And is the virus really, really happening? And am I going to get the shot or am I not going to get the shot? Our minds are so filled with so much stuff that we forget the main part of life is that I love my partner. I married my partner because I love them. So maybe before I argue with them and scream at them and maybe behave in a way that I don't really want to behave. Maybe I'm behaving the way my parents taught me how to behave, or I watched them behave. Maybe right now I need to start behaving in a way that's very appropriate. And I have to remember, I love my partner. So I need to hear them. I need to hear what they have to say. And sometimes when we feel very strongly about something, we don't pay attention to what the other person is asking us for. And I think that's worthy of a conversation. And there's a part of me that thinks that sometimes I wish that we could just get into a room together, hopefully very, very soon, Because if we could get into a room together, there would be the opportunity for every person here. I'm seeing so many names over here. There would be the opportunity over here for people to identify with what is the conflict. What are they feeling? But there's an exercise that you could do on your own as well without doing any screaming. How do you do that? By writing it down. You sit down and you write down what it is. It's an exercise. You write down what it is you're feeling. Why are you feeling very strongly about the position that you're in right now? And the other person writes down what they're feeling about what the position that they're taking is. And then you know what? You exchange papers. And that way, you're not screaming at each other. But hopefully, when you get the paper from the other person and you read it at a time that you're relaxed, you can actually read it. And you can read it and you can say, oh, well, look, Sophia wants to move because, and then you list 10 reasons that you want to move. And somehow reading it on the paper is so much easier these days because there's so much other stuff going on. It's so hard to hear what the other person is saying when everything is crisis. Your mother might have COVID, your mother might not have COVID, your father might have COVID, he might not have COVID. Somebody might be in the hospital, somebody might be on oxygen, one of your children might be showing symptoms of having COVID. There's so much going on. How can you possibly be listening to what the other person's opinions are about making this gigantic move to Israel when there's so much going on. It's kind of like you just want to say to them, don't do it. I'm begging you, don't do this to me now. I cannot handle another thing. You want to talk about moving to Israel? Let's talk about it in 5 years. Let's talk about it after we get our shots. Let's talk about it when I don't have to read about masks and no masks and yes masks. And once we have some sort of a job and a career. So that's my feeling about this, that the timing might not be fabulous right now for talking for life-changing experiences. You know, they say that when you go on AA, one of the major things about going on Alcoholics Anonymous or any of those AAs is you are not allowed to make any big changes while you're on AA. You're not allowed to pick up a new boyfriend. You're not allowed to pick up a new job. You're not allowed to move to a big place. I feel that all of us right now living during this crisis time, yes, we can talk about things, we can discuss things, but to actually have a conversation about making that move right now and implementing that move right now, it might not be the right time. I know it's a terrible thing to say, and Rabbi Rand, I would love to hear your opinion on what I'm saying right now.
Okay, so following up on your words, Doctor, is fantastic because the title of, I don't know the exact title, but I understood from Sophia that the basic message of today's talk is about Shalom Bayit and the transition of moving. And I think what I'm hearing from Dr. Zakheim would be the following question. Are we talking about how to weather the transition that it should not affect our Shalom Bayit? Or are we talking about that we right now, Shalom Bayit is fine, should we make the transition? And what I'm hearing from Dr. Zakheim is, hold on one second. Why are we talking about transitions and Shalom Bayit? Let's first understand where everybody is right now, emotionally right now. How is life right now? Why are we thinking of making this transition? If 300%, if there's a 300% increase of people asking to go on Aliyah, that is sort of I live in Israel. I love Israel. I can't wait till we're all here together. Rabbi Katzin, we wait for you every day, Rabbi Katzin. But my question is, does that show that there is a certain amount of anxiety going on?
Excellent. I love what you're bringing up because it happens to be that Sophia just mentioned to me right now that we have the opportunity now. Let's say we all relax and we say, okay, we're not doing this today. It's making me very anxious. So let's start talking about how are we going to make money over there? What's the plan? What's the plan? How are we going to support ourselves over there? What kind of schools are we going to put our children into? What about from our religious point of view? What about the fact that now we finally have found rabbis in America, and we found a shul in America, and we found a place to live. We found a place where I can call the rabbi if I have a problem. How are we going to deal with all of these changes once we go to Israel? How does someone do something like that, Rabbi Rand? Let's take it one at a time. How does somebody have that conversation about making a parnasa in Israel if they've already got themselves set up over here and they're bringing in the money? How does somebody, Rabbi Rand, you're the perfect person for this conversation. How does somebody, I know it's a tough question, but how does somebody start actually implementing the idea? Let's say they're calm and they say, okay, we realize we're not going to do this right away. Honey, I'm going to back off. I understand it's Monday. We're not going to move on Tuesday, but let's start the conversation. So the starting of the conversation is, Rabbi Rand, how do we approach the idea of making a living in another country?
Okay, so first of all, let's understand what this question is. I don't know myself who the couple is that's asking. Is it a couple that have a great relationship? Is it a couple that have a great life right now of stability in wherever they are living? Or is it a couple which is not having a great relationship? Is it a couple which is not having stability where they're living? So that would be a very, very important question. In terms of the actual idea of transition, I would say coming to Israel, there is a very important knowledge of, first of all, the idea of handling the immigration process and all the bureaucratic issues that go on in this wonderful country of ours. there's an issue of language. And how are we going? Do we know the language? Will we need the language? Russian happens to be a very common language in Israel, but not common enough. Can't necessarily talk it wherever you are in the country. We'll need Ulpan. We'll do Ulpan first or second. How about the social and the religious decisions that have to be made? Here, I'm sure in any country, I'm sure in any neighborhood, but I can tell you from living in Israel that the neighborhood you live in is very, very indicative and of the society and of the religious aspects, the religious levels, uh, attitudes towards religion in general, society, and social issues as well. And of course, if we're dealing with children, there's going to be the education process. Which schools we send them to? It is extremely, extremely segmented over here. The segregated is the word, segregated. There are different schools, different branches of education, and the children will come out extremely different based on where they're going. So these are issues which definitely have to be thought about, discussed, and again, the couple's got to be prepared to take this on.
I love what you're saying. I love the idea that now we're getting to practical conversation about what it means to make the change. But I think beneath all of this, the most important part is to recognize the anxiety that's coming along with making change. This is very normal. If you are a couple that is having a conversation about making a change, and I know even in my family, I'm going to be very honest with you, we have already also started this conversation. If you are a couple that's starting to think about making the change, accept it as an ACCEPT, accept the fact that along with having the conversation, there's going to be a lot of anxiety about the conversation, not even about the move. The anxiety will be about the conversation. Why? Because there is something called, Rabbi Katzin, we talk about this all the time, anticipatory trauma. Anticipatory trauma. What does that mean? Before you even go through the trauma, you anticipate, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. My parents went through horrible, horrible things coming to America. This is going to be a disaster. And guess what? We find, and studies find, that anticipatory trauma is worse than going through the real trauma. Somehow people will get through the trauma. The anticipatory trauma, they can't get through. Why? Because it suddenly gets planted in your brain and it blows up and takes up over your entire brain. And I think it's very important before having any conversation to accept the fact and to realize that it is going to create anticipatory trauma. And to say to each other, this is a very touchy topic. We both come from immigrant families. We have gone through very difficult times. Our parents have lived in Tsarist Russia. They have gone through horrible things. It's still there. It's still in your DNA. It stays in the DNA for 4 generations. So even if you're not a direct immigrant and your parents were a direct immigrant, it is in your DNA in the same way as the Holocaust is in my DNA, even though I didn't go through the Holocaust, but it's in my DNA because my parents went through it. So accept the fact that you have gone through trauma. And the fact that you have gone through horrible trauma is going to create for you anticipatory trauma for your future. And I think that is the lesson of the day. If you walk away from this and you say to yourself, this is a very difficult conversation. I am terrified. I have horrible anticipatory trauma. You know what that will do? That will allow you to have a conversation that accepts the fact that you are in a state of anxiety. And then move on to the next conversation. And then you can start talking about what Rabbi Red is talking about. What about schools? What about temples? What about shuls? What about rabbis? What about making money? But before you go there, you must accept the fact that it is a very, very difficult, triggering topic, especially for those of you who are on this site right now, because all of you who are Russian by descent, you have anticipatory trauma in you. You have lived through, we were there. I was there with Rabbi Katzin and with Rabbi Rand in Moscow. And as I walked through the streets with Rabbi Katzin and listened to the stories, I still can feel the crying. I can feel the crying. I can feel the happiness, depending on where it was we were walking through. And that crying, I felt it. I felt it. Rabbi Rand, we spoke about it. We felt the pain of what happened in Tsarist Russia to Rabbi Katzin. We felt it so palpably. And I think that's something that all of us here have to recognize. Okay, I think we said, I feel, Rabbi Rand, do you want to add on?
Well, just one point about anticipatory trauma. I just want to say a personal vignette of what really just happened. It's interesting you're mentioning that. I just finished my bout with COVID. My bout with COVID. Thank God it passed relatively easily. Relatively easily. I noticed while I was going through it that my fear of what will happen if I get COVID and what will happen to me and what will I possibly be saying goodbye to my family? Would I end up in a hospital? And I'm not an anxious ridden fellow by nature, but I noticed during my bout with COVID that, and thank God it went easy, that my fear of anticipation of what might happen was far greater than what actually was happening. So it's really very apropos. And I might just maybe sum up what we're saying over here, if I may. I know Rebecca Sin usually does that very well. And that is that we're saying like this: if we're talking about transitions to Israel and Shalom Bayit, the first thing that I think that Dr. Zakheim and I are trying to point out is find out what your Shalom Bayit is before we enter the conversation of Shalom Bayit and transition. Find out who you are and who your partner is. Before we talk about such a major move, find out about how you usually go through differences of opinion. How do you resolve your conflicts on simple things before we go ahead and discuss a major move? Then we might want to know, where is the togetherness when we're talking about such a move? Are we together on this or not? And you know what? Maybe we should wonder why we're discussing it right now. Of course, like the doctor said, for sure, yes, discuss it. But maybe now is not the time for the move. Is the move coming from such a healthy spot, a spot of we've thought it out and this is the right move for ourselves and our family? Or is the move coming more from an impulsive, anxiety-ridden sort of move? And if we're going to do the move, let's keep in mind the anticipation, the trauma of the anticipation, and the better prepared we are, then the less anticipatory trauma we're going to be suffering. I think that might sum it up. Would you agree, Rabbi Katzin?
I'm really stunned and moved by your comments, both Dr. Fay and you, Rabbi Rand, because on one hand, I am sure that we have people on this Zoom that may even not prepared to hear what you're saying, because we have very determined group of people, 5 families, or maybe even more by now, made Aliyah, others in love with Israel, because Russian Jews in general, we're in love with Israel. Those of us who moved to different countries feel guilty that we didn't make Aliyah like others, because we feel that Israel is our homeland. And now is the time to move because of the uncertainty of America, and we saw the rioting here, and we feel now is the time to get out and actually come to our homeland. So it's both love for Israel and fear of uncertainty in America. So it's for many people say right now we need to get out. However, you put some kind of a cold water on that and say, wait a second, are you doing it because you're really prepared, your family is strong, and it's a good move for your family right now? Or you're doing it because you got scared in America? You have wonderful schools, wonderful rabbi, wonderful jobs, and you're going to go into something that may endanger your future as a family. And here I just wanted to say one sentence as a question, and maybe ask you, maybe Dr. Fay first of all, because you need to leave, and then I wanted to ask Q&A for everybody else. I found in my experience of working with families for the last 34 years that immigration is an amplifier, nothing else, nothing more. Families that experience problems before, as you said, you, Dr. Fay, said that. Families that were experiencing problems, and probably they would stay in Russia, they would still be married. They're not married anymore after the immigration. They parted because of the changes, and that, brought about another change. I remember when I came to America, it was 1986, and I met a family that said to me, We moved to America for the sake of our children, and we lost them here. I was shocked. Like, what do you mean? Well, our son is an alcoholic. Wow, what's going on? What happened? So we lost him. Why did you lose him? Well, because we spoke Russian, he spoke English. We lost the connection with the child. And well, very similar challenges with the teens will be in Israel as well. So first of all, being aware of the challenges of change for the relationship of husband and wife and between parents and children. I think the very awareness of this challenge is a very important step in successfully overcoming them in one piece, right? In one piece. And of course, we're motivated by love, and there is a mitzvah to be with Jewish people and surrounded by Jewish communities. So of course, there are many, many things that are positive for the Jewish future of our people here in Israel. But at the same time, you say it has to be the right time and the right place. Correct?
I would say, if I may jump before Dr. Zakheim, is that okay, Doctor? I would say it's very, very correct. The one thing I would modulate is as follows. I wouldn't say that the doctor and I are trying to put cold water on anybody's plans. Dr. Zakheim herself is talking about moving to Israel. I live in Israel and have raised a family, a beautiful family here. And I would not say put cold water on it. I say come, but do it in a way that it will be the best move for you, the safest move for you. And as you said, that Rabbi Katzin so well, do it in a way that it will be so much more of a positive effect than Khalila, a negative effect.
And you will not need to come back. We want you to move and not to run back. Dr. Faye.
I want to completely agree with what he's saying, because yes, as he said, we are talking about it. And it's very interesting. As soon as the conversation starts, and there's a lot of us, we have a big family. Baruch Hashem, I have 5 children that all live here in New York and New Jersey. And as soon as we start talking about it, you can see people getting so tense and afraid and anxious. And what do you mean? You know, what are we going to do about schools? And then other ones start making plans right away and start making phone calls the next day. But the anxiety drives us, and we have to keep, like, just stay in touch with reality. You know, the reality is that we are living through difficult times. And yes, it's the best idea in the world to move to Israel, but not to let the anxiety take it over.
Sorry.
We can't hear you, Rabbi.
I wanted Sophia to direct now. Yeah, I know that you have some questions. First of all, start, and then we'll go to Q&A to the degree that time allows. Sophia, your question after hearing this.
Well, I feel like I got a lot to think about, especially what anticipatory trauma, this topic, I feel like is so not confined, and therefore it increases every time the anxiety to think and redefine. And that's probably the reason why I started this whole group, to map out the schools, to map out the communities, to make it more definable for myself and to fight my anxiety in such a way. Maybe you have other suggestions how to make, how to fight that particular anticipatory trauma.
Sophia, I just want to tell you how inspired I am by the idea that you put together this group, and that you recognize the fact, it's gigantic, that you recognize the fact that it's not your own personal feeling, that you're not the only person feeling this way. That's really an incredible kindness on your part, because what you could have said to yourself was, well, I'm feeling anxious. I'll just make an appointment for myself with a therapist for $100 and I'll deal with my own problem. And you're saying, no. I realize that if I'm feeling this way, then my community is feeling this way. And that is such a beautiful thing that you're doing. Now, Rabbi Rand, do you want to answer that? Because I was going to add on that in terms of dealing with the anticipatory trauma, yeah, such an easy thing. There's a little secret to it. You know what it is? So easy. Recognizing it and being aware of it. That's it. Can you imagine? Just by the mere fact that you just said, you know, that anticipatory trauma that you're talking about, I just identified with that. That's what I'm feeling. Every time I think about moving, all of a sudden I have all of this trauma, and that's anticipatory trauma. Just the fact that you are recognizing it. I am guaranteeing you tonight, when the conversation comes up again, you're going to be a different person because you can accept it. You've owned up to it. You're saying, I own it. I own it. I own the fact that my trauma is happening and it's anticipatory trauma. I'm not living in the trauma. I'm still safe. I'm still living here in America. Nobody's shooting me down. Nobody's burning down my temple. I'm fine. I can still carry on. My children are still in school. My life is still the same. That trauma is anticipatory. I'm okay. I have a roof over my head. I have food to eat. I have people that care about me. So recognize it is anticipatory. What does that mean? You're anticipating the trauma. You're not living it. You're not back in Tsarist Russia. You're home. You're okay. You're in Brooklyn, New York. You're fine. I'm in New Jersey. Rabbi Katzin is in Brooklyn. My brother is lucky. Okay, he's in Israel. But you know what? There's a lot of other issues that come up in Israel also. But yeah, it's our dream. Like he said, Rabbi Rand, we all want to be there. And he's saying, come, come. We are coming. We're coming. Get ready.
Can I
Dr.
say something as a layperson? Is that all right if I jump in?
Please.
So my husband, my family and I were planning Aliyah, and it's very exciting and very stressful. And Sophia, you may already be aware, but I just wanted to throw this in there, mapping out the schools and the communities and all of that. It's so huge and overwhelming. One of the things that we have found helpful is jumping into these, some of the realtors have Zooms in different communities. Have you been in there? Excellent. So you can talk to people and find out what's the vibe and what are the schools like and all that. Great. Okay, there you go. Thanks.
I think as well, one of the Zooms, actually, last Sunday, we had our own, friend and member of this group already speaking about his positive experience from Israel. So we see this anticipation. We can also, Dr. V, remember when you were in Moscow and you were speaking about trauma, you said that the same way that anticipating something negative paralyzes, also too, the power of imagination and imagining something beautiful waiting for you can be actually the best way to overcome trauma, anticipating something great. And we indeed anticipate for 2,000 years, next year in Jerusalem with joy.
I love that. I think that that's very, very, very important. It's interesting because when we started first talking, and I was thinking that we're talking about the past, present, and the future. Yeah, the future is all about positive thinking. The future is about the positive vision, about that vision of, oh my gosh, I tell you, every night I dream about that day that I will wake up in Eretz Yisrael and think that this is my country, this is where I live. I look forward to it. I can't wait. I'm going to have to bounce out at this point. It was an honor to be here. I look forward to being here again. I see that there are people that want to ask questions. So Sophia, I will leave it up to you to figure out how we can organize that opportunity to answer those questions. We don't have to wait a month. We just can't do it today, but I'm happy to have another session as soon as you would like to have it.
Right, it's an excellent question about Midos, and we will organize something more specific on children and adapting into a new country.
Absolutely, and you don't have to wait too long. I'm very excited about being here and actually making the next session, if you'd like, about questions directly. So if you want to even follow up this week, that would be fine. I leave it up to you. Okay, have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Faye. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Thank you so much for the honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Is Robert Rand still with us?
He also had to leave.
He also had to leave. Okay. Sophia, do you want to still hear the questions out? Do you have questions that people want to ask? Should we stop broadcasting and open the, so to speak, cozy, kind of discussion anyway?
I think people would be more comfortable to ask personal questions.
Excellent.